Wow, so yeah, that's my first cousin.
Wow.
That's your business.
Wow.
That's too much.
Okay.
Yeah, shit, that is small.
All right. So we're learning for the Refuah Shalema of Moish. Everything should go well today.
Amen.
Okay. So we were learning yesterday that, when you have, oh, wait a minute. I just realized I'm not on the screen. Just give me a minute. Oh, wait. There you go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what we were learning yesterday is that if a person is damaged by a hazard that is placed on the sidewalk by a neighbor, number one, you have to determine how normal or expected that kind of hazard is. But if it is an unexpected hazard, so then the person who placed it there, like poured out the water or whatever it is, especially soapy water, they're going to be liable, but they're only going to be liable for damage to the person's body. They're not going to be liable for damage to the person's effects, his clothing, and anything else that he's carrying. So what that translates into is if a person has a pair of glasses, you'll be putter. The person who put the damage there will be putter from the glasses. But if he broke a tooth, you have to pay for his dental care. And what was the point of question? What if he broke a denture or an implant? So Rav Sharaga seems to be of the opinion that anything that is sometimes removed from the mouth is considered to be a kli, and therefore you won't have to pay for that. But an implant, which is what he was talking about at the end, is really considered to be part of his body, even more so than a pacemaker. I was just looking at the footnote, this last footnote, that there's a distinction you could make, he says, between an implanted tooth and a pacemaker, because he quotes from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who says that davka shein totevet opeya nachris hamuchuberes laguf ushar dvarm sheniskaru b'poskim le'iser asurim bahana. We were talking about, in a different context in halacha, which is that you're not allowed to benefit from a dead person's body, right? So the question is, are you allowed to use someone else's pacemaker? So apparently the poskim are permissive to use a used pacemaker, but he says that in contrast to that, an implanted tooth, or let's say he says a wig, a toupee, are considered to be part of a person's body because they are permanently attached. Yeah, that's what he says. Opeya nochuri tamechuberet laguf, if it's attached to the body. Maybe like implant.
Glued on.
Yeah, but even a glued on toupee, you remove periodically. So I'm not sure. He says hamechuberet laguf, if it's attached to the body. I'm not sure what that means. Kaven shem tfelim laguf lo tzrichim ezer v'siyua mibachutz, because they're considered to be ancillary to the body and they don't need any assistance, external assistance, in order to attach them. But when it comes to a pacemaker, there are times when you need to change the battery, and you have to do other things that require maintenance. And therefore, it's not considered to be a completely ancillary part of his body. It could be that with the new technology in pacemakers today, I don't know that. Do you need to change the battery on a pacemaker?
Yeah, you do.
Every 10 years, I think.
10 years, yeah. My father-in-law just had it done 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Is it surgery to replace it?
No, No, batteries extend. I don't think so.
Well, they have to cut into the skin.
Oh, so
It's a
maybe it
minor,
wasn't what he
minor
did a
surgery.
couple of years. He did have to replace his battery, I remember.
10 years.
I'll look into it and get back to him.
Okay.
That's my wife, she knows all these.
ואם כן, יש לומר
Where's
דגם
Joey?
דגם הפוסקים שכתבו דקוצב לב אינו חלק מהגוף, and therefore even the poskim who say that a pacemaker is not considered to be a portion of the body because it needs to be periodically removed, mikol makom yodu b'shein totevis tavi chelek mehaguf yechayev balabor. But they would agree that an implanted tooth does have the status of being part of your body. You wouldn't therefore be allowed to transfer that to anybody else. But also, if a person's implanted tooth gets damaged or a crown, then you would have to pay for that.
What year was this written?
Just in the last 10 years, within the last 10 years.
So like, here it's saying that you're not allowed to remove anything from a dead body. So how does this relate to?
Organ donation?
Yeah.
Yeah, normally organ donation, you wouldn't be allowed to use organs for any other purpose other than to save a life. When it comes to saving a life, that trumps all of these prohibitions.
So, because I mean, the whole thing with organ transfer is that you need to be sure that the person dead before you can take the organ out.
Correct.
So the fact that we're saving a life is trumping everything else that's.
Other than killing the patient.
Yeah.
Other than taking down to the chop
You
shop.
can't kill someone else to save someone else.
Right. So we've talked about organ donation in the past, for some reason, there are some poskim even today who do not encourage organ donation, but it is something that a frum Jew should be a fan of,
So when we sign the card that, and that we allowed to take the organ,
Yeah, but you have to limit it. You have to limit it to things that can be harvested after the heart stops beating, which right now is like corneas, skin. They say that it's possible to harvest the lung after the heart stops beating. A kidney, perhaps. Yeah, but all right. Okay, so let us go on. I just got to look up one word, which is the word gagon, another modern Hebrew word that I'm not familiar with. An awning. Did anyone know that was the word for awning? Okay, isn't that interesting? Gagon, yeah, it's like a mini roof. Yeah, is an awning. Okay. So here's the next tshuva. Gagon shenafal beruach v'hizik lamechonit. An awning got blown off by the wind and ended up damaging a car. Who's liable? Okay. Yeah, right.
The God.
Right.
Was it secured well? Like, was it?
Yeah, well,
secured to
yeah,
withstand-
we may have to look into all of these issues, right? Let's see. Okay. Okay, so ani dar b'dira schura sheyesh ba mirpeset segura shemiyuedet gam lesuka. I live in an apartment. I rent the apartment. It has a mirpeset that's has a cover on top of it, but it's also used for a sukkah. Hashana kishabaniti et hasukkah parakti et hagagon. So this year, when I was building the sukkah, I removed the awning, shehu pach matechet, which is made out of, I guess, some kind of metal. Bechdei lasim tzchach. So it's some kind of pach is tin. It's like aluminum tin. It's a light metal. A light metal, probably corrugated. Yeah. Bechdei lasim tzchach. Ve'acharei hachag hechazarti et hagagon limikomo. And then after Sukkot was over, I put it back. Uvalel, probably not so well, apparently. Uvalel Shabbat ha'acharon nashvu ruchot chazakot v'hipilu et hagagon. So the last Friday night, there was a lot of wind, and they blew off the awning al mechonit shahita chona birshut harabim, on top of, and landed on top of a car that was parked on the public street. V'al nigram nezek la mechonit, and as a result, the car was damaged. Okay. Hayim yesh chiyuv tashlumin al nizkei hamechonit. So am I liable for the damage to the car? V'im kain al mi chala chovat hatashlumin alai hasocher o al baal hadira shahagagon shalo. And furthermore, who's the liable party? Am I the liable party since I'm the tenant, or is it upon the landlord, the owner of the apartment and the owner of the awning? Okay. So, Marv, what do you say?
So they have this a lot, like in Florida and stuff, the winds and things blow stuff around and all that. So the law basically is if it's foreseeable, you should have taken greater care to prevent someone or this thing blowing off or whatever. If you could foresee that would happen with their usual wind or something like that, you're probably liable. If it's more than that, like a hurricane or a cyclone or something like that, it's an act of God, probably not liable.
And they prove that.
Well, then you have to get the weather people in and experts and all kinds of stuff.
I was gonna ask, what's the usual wind in Florida?
No, no,
I presume hurricanes aren't
Get
considered
into that.
usual wind, even though they
Yeah,
get them every year.
sometimes, and insurance too. Can you get insurance for floods in certain zones? Can you get
Right.
And
insurance
no
for
matter how do you
winds, you know,
prove
like,
they
if
didn't,
insurance company insure you, then it's probably something you should be protecting.
yeah, but how do you
Right.
prove that it wasn't protected properly, it wasn't tied down properly? How do you?
Yeah, so you have to inquire, you know, you ask the guy and they discovered or something in a civil lawsuit, you'd say, well, let's
What did you
start from the beginning. You brought it in before Pesach and then you brought it back after Pesach. What, did you nail it down? Did you know, what did you do? You know, that kind of stuff. Like that. If you acted reasonably.
Use the same screws, same fasteners.
Yeah, so maybe you didn't put any screws in, just left it there, right, and pulled away.
It's good to say that, correct.
Yeah, right, so you need evidence, basically.
But in this case where the person was renting.
This is going nowhere.
But in the case where this person was renting, who would be liable? The person to remove and put it back on, or the owner of the property?
Right, so in civil law, you'd have negligence would be your cause of action, so if it was his place and he was the owner and he was substandard conduct, unreasonable, it was foreseeable and all that, then he'd be liable. But there's also occupier's liability. Which means whoever the occupier is should take reasonable care for the safety of others. So it could be an owner, a tenant, maintenance company, management company, like in a condo or something. If they were the ones who are supposed to take reasonable care of the property as the occupier, and somebody else visiting or whatever got hurt, then they're liable. And
I mean, it sounds suspicious to me because it sounds like, I mean, if it happened shortly after Sukkot that this thing blew off, there's a good chance that he probably didn't secure it the way he
right.
should have.
Right.
Like, you know. Okay, why don't we take a look? Isa bibava kama, avno sakino umasao. So the Gemara in Bava Kama makes a general statement that if a person's rock, his knife, or his load, whatever he's carrying, shehinichan berosh gago, he puts it on the top of his roof, v'naflu beruach mitsuya, and it gets blown off with a common wind, like not a hurricane wind, but a common wind. Vihiziku, and it ends up causing damage, then the person who left it on his roof is chayav. Aval beruach she'ena mitsuya, havi ones upatur. But if it's an uncommon wind, then that's considered to be completely an accident, and he's going to be exempt. The reason why you're liable when a common wind blows it off the roof is because that's a subcategory of one of the 4 categories of damage, and this is in the category of fire. Like if I light a fire in my backyard and the fire travels to my neighbor and then ends up causing him property damage, I'm going to be liable for that. Shaharei b'chol nizkei eish, gam kein haruach molichat eish. because that's, you know, the wind is the thing that transports the fire from my property to his. And therefore, even though I left things on my property, but if they were caused to travel by a common wind, I'm going to be liable. Ulam, a Mishnah b'Bava Metzia omeret, but there's a Mishnah in Bava Metzia that says as follows: Hakotel v'ha'ilan shenaflu l'reshus harabim v'hiziku patra milashalim. That if a wall or a tree that are on my property collapse and fall into a public thoroughfare and cause damage, then I'm going to be exempt from having to pay. And what's the reason? Upirish Rashi hatam bazeh ki mahayalo la'asos da'anusu va'anus rachmana patre. What could I have done? It was a complete accident, and I'm putter for an onus. Even though a person is considered to be ready to damage at any time, whether he's awake or sleeping, we notice we don't let a person off by saying, well, it's a first-time thing, we'll let you off the hook. No, anytime you cause damage, you're considered to be a source of potential damage. Zedavka ba'adam hamazik. That's only when the person himself with his body damages. Avol mamono shehizik ba'ones pater. But anytime my property causes damage and it was a complete accident, I'm going to be pater. So
what happens if it's a dead branch over the street and we should have cut it down?
exactly. Or what if the wall was showing signs of dilapidation, right? Yeah, I walk. There's a certain fence that there's certain materials that you would think over the years people should have figured out that they shouldn't use to build fences in a frigid climate like Toronto. So, people have built fence walls, I get whatever you call it, that when you walk down Clark Avenue, you see the fences on people's backyards. They're crumbling. It's mind-boggling to me. Like, if I hire a contractor and he says, well, we'll make your wall out of concrete. And it's like, it's not that many years and these walls are crumbling.
Yeah.
Like, what were you thinking? Why would you make a wall out of something like this when
Initial saving of money, but
right? I guess maybe that they thought it would be less money. But in any event, yeah, so I register your question, Hal. You have to say that this was an unforeseen kind of damage. So, but we have to see what's the differentiation between an object that blows off the roof and a collapsing wall. Because of Hanimuke Yosef Sham, Delefi Hatam Shel Rashi, Kol Zeh Dafka Im Binao Kiroi Kefi Hatkein. He says, the Nemuke Yosef writes, based on this argument that it was a complete onus, you have to say that the wall was built according to code, according to spec. Avalim bana otam shelo karoi chayev. But if the wall was not built correctly, such that it's flimsy to begin with, so then you can't say that I'm putter because, what could I have done? Behevi lazeraya mimashakosov b'tosefta, nafal hakotel machmat hazivaot, machmat haruach, machmat hagishamim. So he says that the Tosefta writes that if the wall falls because of vibrations, because of wind, because of rain, in bino kedarko pater v'im lav chayav. If you built it according to the specs that normal people build walls, right, then you're pater if it collapses. To building code, right? But if not, you're going to be chayav. Ve'ein hevdel im hezika b'sha'as hanafila bein im hezika la'achar hanafila keven shebeno kedarko lefi hatkein anusu upater adkan tochen devarim. It makes no difference if the damage was caused as the wall was falling, or if after it fell, someone bumped into it or an animal bumped into it and got damaged. The bottom line is you're going to be pater since you built it according to the proper code. You're going to be pater. V'chein kasav habeis Yosef b'shem hamesharim de'im naflu machmas va'ot ruchot u'gshamim b'no karaoi patur ve'im lav chayav. That it all depends on how well you built the item. Uv'shulchan aruch kasav Hakoisel veha'ilan shenaflu l'rishus harabim vehizichu potter milashale. The Shulchan Aruch writes that a wall, a tree that fall into rishus harabim, if they cause damage, then you're potter from having to pay. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins according to that Gemara. The Kosav Haramasham d'chol zeh kishebana'o keroi mitchilato. And again, the Ramah says you have to have built it properly and maybe planted the tree properly. I guess also is a factor in order to be potter. Avalim lo bina'o keroi machmad zeh nafal hakotel chayiv b'nizka. But if you didn't build it sturdy enough to begin with, and that's the reason why it collapses, so then you're going to be liable. V'lachein b'mikreh hazeh talui. And therefore, in this kind of situation, it'll depend. Im hagagon hayam mechubar v'omeid b'teken, if the awning was properly secured, and the tenant did everything he was supposed to do to make sure that it was tightly secured. Hasocher potter milashalem v'im lav hu chayav. If everything was, if the tenant did that, then he's going to be potter. But if not, if there's a concern that perhaps after Sukkot, when he put the awning back, maybe he didn't really know what he was doing and didn't secure it properly, so then he's going to be chayiv. Now, let us continue. Everything sounds reasonable so far, right? Now, v'im hasocher kibel et hadira ba'ofen shahagagon lo hayama chubar keraoi. But let's say when the tenant took occupancy, he didn't tamper at all with the awning. Like, in other words, he took occupancy in October after Sukkot was over. And then in November, a wind comes and blows off the awning. Imhu lo naga me'olam begagon, if he never touched the awning, lo yitachen shetiach rayas al hasocher, then it's not logical to say that the liability should be on the tenant, kevin shahabe alim huzeh shehiniach et hagagon shelo kahogen, because it was the landlord who had secured the awning inappropriately. V'lo haya l'socher la'alot al dato shehagagon la'omed b'teken. It was the tenant had no way of knowing that the awning was not properly secured. And there we say that he's going to be potter and the landlord is going to be liable. I'm just thinking to myself, what happens if he hears clang, 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 right, one night, and
Nothing about it.
right. Or let's say he calls the landlord and he says, listen, I think this awning is not secured properly. What do you want to do about it? And the landlord says, well, I'll come next week and I'll take a look at it. And, next week turns into 2 weeks. And then eventually he shows up. But before then it blows off, so then I think the landlord would also be liable.
Many years ago, downtown Toronto, in one of the big commercial buildings, windows started falling off.
Yes, I remember that story. Yeah.
That guy was one of the lawyers on the case. They sued the owner, the tenants. They sued the design engineer, the architect, the
Yeah.
installer, manufacturer of the windows, the installer of the windows.
Oh,
They sued
wow.
everybody. It went on for 10 years.
Yeah.
And the insurance company, there was like 10 insurance companies involved in damages that.
Why the
flowed from that.
why the tenant? What's
But who-
Because the tenant was the occupier.
But who
That's
ended
it.
up paying,
No.
The insurance.
Right.
Followed, but
But-
that's the.
But like as we're seeing from here, there's no reason why the tenant should be liable. Why should the tenant?
Especially for something like that,
Yeah.
it's not an awning.
If it can be proved to be poor construction. If it can't
That's
be
right.
proved to be called poor construction, but let's say the
No, but-
tenant, every day the tenant kicked the window.
The
Yeah, but that's
manufacturer,
not-
the manufacturer
just saying.
said that some
I
of the
mean, you
tenants
have
were
to define
pushing
it.
improperly on the
What
windows,
caused it to
open
fall
it,
out?
like, like it was one of those where you push it and open it or something.
Oh, I
Say-
see.
Saying you had a hand in
Right.
loosening it or
That
whatever.
you didn't open it
Oh,
properly.
that's
you
that's-
didn't maintain it
That's-
properly.
I don't
That's
got.
a
I don't hear it,
stretch.
right?
I don't
That's a
hear it.
stretch.
That's a stretch.
But anyway, everybody.
By the way, the new condos next to the fire station, right? So somebody explained to me who lives there that there's an engineering flaw in the way that they constructed the roofs, because they're sloped and constructed in such a way that when it rains and and it's very cold, ice sheets will form,
And then
and then-
slide off.
and then slide off, and that could cause significant damage.
One's with the
You
promenade.
can get killed.
Promenade.
that-
No, no, no.
The one next
No,
to
the
the fire
townhouses.
station,
Oh, the
yeah.
townhouse.
The townhouses next to the fire station.
What the truth that is, because they had flat roofs. They're very flat. Yeah.
No, I think that like there's like an awning, there's an awning that's slanted over the doors.
Over
Yeah.
the doors, yeah, the top,
Yeah.
ones behind the.
It's happened.
I think
I had a case
Gerald
about 4
Hartman
months
is
ago where where a neighbor's house was constructed with 3 downspouts, water downspouts on one side, and all the water ejected into the neighbor's house and went into the basement and flooded it. And they were liable for, for negligent design and, all kinds of stuff. A lot of people.
Right.
They had a case, this happened about 10 years ago, where there was, New Year's, or a holiday party at the TD, Bank, downtown. And, this guy who was probably had a few too many drinks, he was showing them how strong the windows are. And he threw himself against the window just to show everybody who was in the room, and he went right through.
Why are you laughing? How else can we entertain you, Wayne? Should we take you down to the morgue?
Imagine watching.
Nice faces he goes through the window.
Look at this, it's so solid.
That's exactly.
Okay,
Does that come under the Darwin Awards?
all right. Yeah, Darwin Awards, exactly. Nebuch, wow.
Stupidity doesn't come anything.
Aval im basukot hu pireket hagagon, kidei lasot sukkah. But if on sukkahs, he was the one who removed the awning so that he could build his sukkah, vehechazir oto la'achar chag hasukot, and he's the one who put it back and re-secured it after sukkahs, berega shehu pireket hagagon hu silek ma'aseh rishon. So the moment he removed the awning, he's now removed whatever effort the landlord had made to secure the awning. And then even if he puts it back with the same strength and the same fasteners that the original landlord had done, then he'll now become liable because clearly it wasn't done properly. And so what does the footnote say?
There's an issue with refastening like that sometimes, because the hole that you're fastening into doesn't have the same strength of hole.
Right, over the course of time, it wears down, yeah.
So let's say he's lived in this apartment for 5 years, and every sukkah he's taken the awning off and put it back on,
That's right.
used the same holes. At some point, that bolt, you could probably pull it out by hand.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
I mean,
What plaintiffs do in that case, they hire forensic engineers and reconstruction accident guys after the fact to redo it and give an opinion saying, I looked at the holes and they were too wide and it probably just came out easy.
They were
The
stretched.
guy caused the problem.
Right, right. Al kain lahalacha, and therefore, just the final psak, im hagagon amad beteken, v'huchzak bibragim kinidrash, if it was firmly secured with the proper fasteners, you have to do the forensics like Marv said afterwards. V'hagagon nafal ala mechonit v'hizik, and then, but nonetheless, the wind was so strong that it tore off the awning. Now, you could probably even tell by just looking at it afterwards, if it tore off the awning because the wind was so strong, then there'll probably be pieces of the awning still attached to the frame of the mirpeset
Where the fasteners are holding.
when the fasteners were holding. Okay, putter. So then the tenant will be putter. Shemazalo shel bala mechonit garim, because it's just bad mazel of the guy who parked his car under the in that particular spot. Yeah. Aval im hasocher hemidoto shelo lefi hateken hu chayav l'shalem. But if you can tell that it just tore neatly off because the screws just gave in, so then the tenant's gonna be liable. Provided that the tenant had actually handled the awning, had tampered with the awning to be able to build his sukkah. But if he never touched it, then the landlord is going to be liable. And there's a couple of things in the footnotes that we're going to want to see. One of them I see is that he says, like, what if the tenant had noticed that the awning was not properly secured? Okay.
After he attempted.
No. He never touched it, but he took occupancy of the apartment and he noticed clang, 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 So we'll have to deal with that in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. So we'll hold it here. Everyone should have a refuah shalema. Have a great day, everyone.